Good afternoon. I'm Jason Marzak, Director of the Adrian Arch Latin America Center at the Atlantic Council, and I'm delighted to welcome the Foreign Relations Minister of Ecuador, Luis Gallegos, as part of our ongoing Leaders of the Americas series, with today's show supported by Boeing. At this historic time, just over 48 hours after Joe Biden became president-elect, I will have a wide-ranging conversation with the minister. But first, I'd like to pass it to Adrian Arch, the founder of the Adrian Arch Latin America Center, as well as Executive Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council. Adrian, over to you.
Thank you, Jason. It's an honor to welcome to the Atlantic Council His Excellency Luis Gallegos, Minister of Foreign Relations and Human Mobility of Ecuador. Minister Gallegos is joining us today in person at the Atlantic Council. We are socially distanced and have our masks at hand. As part of his official trip to Washington, he has stopped here. Mr. Minister, you certainly picked a historic moment for your visit. Last February, just weeks before the onset of COVID-19, we had the pleasure to host President Lenin Moreno. His historic presidential visit marked a new path forward for Ecuador and the United States. There's a picture of me with him. Minister Gallegos, as we prepare for a presidential transition, we look forward to hearing your thoughts about the future of the US-Ecuador bilateral relationship. As I told President Moreno, visiting Ecuador is right at the top of my wish list. And as soon as COVID is conquered, I will look forward to experiencing your country, its amazing biodiversity, rich culture, and the warmth of its people. Your Excellency, your presence here in Washington is another great step further in building the relationship between our countries at such a critical moment. Now let me turn it back to Jason Marzak to moderate this conversation.
Great.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And hopefully I'll be able to join you on that trip to Ecuador as well. I want to also, as Adrian said, we are following all appropriate COVID protocols. I am seated here on stage 6 feet from the minister as part of this conversation today. The Minister Gallegos, first of all, has a long career in Ecuador's public service, in Ecuador's foreign service specifically. I was actually looking, Minister, when you were 20 years old, you first entered Ecuador's foreign service. He's also no stranger to Washington. He served as Ecuador's ambassador here for 6 years, but I understand we were speaking the other day. You've been here 10 years in total.
Yes.
Including teaching at American University, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Which is only 5 minutes from my home here in Washington. Prior to his appointment in July, you were up in New York serving as Ecuador's ambassador to the United Nations. You've had a number of other posts as well, including serving as Ecuador's ambassador to El Salvador, Ecuador's ambassador to Australia. We could probably take the next 30 minutes talking about your career, but let's get into the questions. I also, before doing so, I want to also acknowledge Ambassador Ivan Baki, who's joining us today, appropriately socially distanced, came to Washington as ambassador earlier this year and has just done a phenomenal job. So thanks, Ambassador. Great to have you here. Now, Minister Gallegos, as Adrian said, you are here you picked quite a historic moment to travel to Washington. Just days after the results were announced, I saw your president, Lenin Moreno, congratulate President-elect Biden over Twitter for his election win. I'd like to start out by asking, and this is actually the first conversation that I'm having with a foreign minister from the region, and I'd like to ask you first to start off. What do you see as some of the most time-sensitive opportunities for Ecuador and the United States to work on during the upcoming next administration?
Well, Jason, first, before going into your question, I'd like to thank Adrian for her introduction and her invitation, and you as a moderator. And I thank the opportunity. It's a historic moment, both for the United States and for the world. I believe we have undoubtedly a challenge in the situation we are living. I would like to rationalize that COVID is the first international crisis we have of the dimensions that affect every country, but with the particularity that we have never had before. which is that it risks your life and those of your dear ones. Every individual in the world is at risk of dying or having the effect of a virus, which we would never have dreamt of in the earlier part of the year. This has crippled and put on its knees the health systems of countries all over the world. It has affected gravely the economies, the productive chains of international trade, and it has affected the infrastructure of our social network and affected it to the point of reducing our compliance with the ODAs, not being able to meet the challenges of development, and creating the possibility of an increased poverty and extreme poverty in the region, and I would generalize in the world. So it's a challenge that we have to meet in solidarity. We've done our best to do that. And I think that at this important juncture, we need an international effort to solve this problem that we are facing, not only in the medical area where you have new medicines to deal with this virus, but also the vaccine, which is the hope for all of us. Yeah. And that we are looking for universal access, like from countries like mine, who have limited resources to acquire the vaccines. I'm hopeful that solidarity will be increased as we move forward. And I think the major challenges we have, and to say it very bluntly, is that if we don't solve it all, we won't get out of this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ecuador is one of the first countries in the region to be impacted by COVID. It's put forward a number of important measures to try to mitigate the impact of COVID in the country. And I want to go back to COVID, but let me go back to my first question on the upcoming Biden administration and where do you see the opportunities? Of course, cooperation on COVID, as you're mentioning. I'd like to ask you about other opportunities to enhance the US-Ecuador bilateral relationship under this.
We have a long tradition and a long relationship with the United States that has indelible issues that we have dealt with in both Republican and Democratic administrations. We have to deal with issues of security, narco trafficking, in the sense of being able to curtail that scourge of international origin. We have 2 million Ecuadorians that live in the United States or integrated and work in the country, and we have around 100,000 Americans that live in Ecuador and have chosen Ecuador to retire. We have an integrated societies, which from a level of church relationships, of people-to-people relationship is very, very strong. I've always tried to underline the importance of that people-to-people relationship. We have economic ties. We're looking for the advancement of a treaty on trade, which we hope we can develop the guideline for the future negotiation of these treaties. We have a very important relationship, not only in the economic sense, but also in issues that deal with cooperation, that deal with international mitigation of other types of effects in a biodiverse country. As Adrian was saying, we'd love to have you in Ecuador, Adrian, and Jason, you please, as soon as this thing, we get over this thing, we'd love to have you and demonstrate what a diverse country, a biodiverse country is.
Ecuador is such a beautiful country.
We have a nature, and God has given us the enormous possibility of having the Galapagos Islands. Around my capital, in 200 kilometers around my capital, you have from glacial Arctic in the mountains to absolute tropics, so the variety and the sense. You will find a very friendly people who have an extraordinary relationship with the United States and its people. And I believe that the challenges we have met have to be dealt with structurally. If we have migratory problems, if we have economic cooperation problems, if we have security problems, we have to overcome them systemically. And this is why we're meeting tomorrow in the dialogue, which is a process we created with the United States to sit down face to face and deal with these problems on a structural basis and be able to solve them jointly.
Yeah.
There are always issues that we have to agree or maybe disagree on, but we will always look at that challenge of dialogue, which brings the international relationship in a fruitful product for our countries and our people.
Thank you. And for all of you watching as well, you can feel free to submit questions via the Q&A function on Zoom. If you have a question on Twitter as well, you can do that direct at the Twitter handle ACLATAM, and someone will share that question with me. I want to, Minister, get into 2 points that you've mentioned and drill down a little bit further on those. One being COVID-19 and one being US-Ecuador commercial relations, with the US being Ecuador's top trading partner. With regard to COVID-19, I'd like to get your thoughts on, you mentioned cooperation, partnership. In your ideal scenario, what else would be done? How could the U.S. with Ecuador and frankly across the region, how could the U.S. Be an even better partner with the region insofar as recuperating from COVID-19, both the health impacts, the social impacts, the economic impacts, as you were saying before? In your optimism, what does that look like, and what would that potentially look like over the course of the next 4 years?
I think that when you talk about the health issue, we undoubtedly would appreciate the context of your technology and your science to overcome this. I think it's a need to joint efforts with all universities, academia, governments, laboratories, whomever has these capabilities in the world, that there are many who are desperately trying to find a handle to solving this problem. We as a small country will have to have international relations with both the United States, Europe, and other countries in order for us to supersede this in a structured way. On the economic side, we are seeing the effects of the constraints and demobilization of populations. We are seeing the breaking of productive chains where we have impeding the capabilities of free trade. And that affects the employment and affects the people who are in the exporting business in our country. We'd like to see a more open market for all these issues. We understand the limitations because it's a market-driven force, but we would like to also diversify the capabilities of Ecuadorian production to give the opportunity, special to women and to youth, the possibility of integrating the international market. I think if you give the populations of our countries the opportunity of going into the international market, the benefits outweigh the context of social strife.
Yeah.
If we can overcome poverty pockets by creating jobs and creating the possibility of having these people as small entrepreneurs that can be able to accede international markets, we would have broken the camel's back on this issue.
Yeah. And in some ways, I'm an optimist always in life, but in some ways, this could frankly be an opportunity to leapfrog some of the developmental challenges, including in Ecuador, if we correctly rebuild from COVID-19.
Absolutely. I think that all crisis brings an opportunity. This is also something that we are going to have to go back and learn the lessons that have been taught here. Mm-hmm. We do not have education as we used to have it formally. Our job market is going into the internet phase. We are going to use technology even more. We have to have the possibility of giving people this alternative of being able to work at a distance, and that will create more productivity. Ecuador has more cell phones than people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
wow.
The level of technology that you have dispersed in an agriculturally based country is incredible, because in the palm of your hand, you have an apparatus that has the capability of seeing the markets, the prices of your commodities, and so on. But it also gives you an independence and a handle on information, which is readily available, and we have to be sure that it is verified and trustworthy. But the issues of technology will guide the process even more as we move into the new phases of the post-COVID world.
Yeah. Minister, you were also mentioning U.S. commercial relations with Ecuador. The Minister of Finance was recently here in Washington as well. One of the issues potentially on the table is that of a bilateral investment treaty between the U.S. and Ecuador. How is that coming along, and also what are some of the optimal next steps that are taken with regard to that bilateral investment treaty?
Well, we are looking into a trade agreement with the United States. We would like very much to begin the process of negotiation and streamline and have a chronology and a map, a route of how we do this in the future. Ecuador has elections in February. You've had elections recently. That would means that both governments are moving into another phase. It is extremely important for us to establish state policies that will carry it beyond the government of President Moreno, who has had an extraordinary relationship with the United States. I think we've built on that. It is a possibility, a bipartisan agreement on the issue of trade. Trade for me is the opportunity of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
If we adequately do this from the Ecuadorian side and from the American side, we will have created an example of how to do this. As an integrated Ecuador into the system of free of trade agreements in the Pacific, we could also look into what the new Pacific means in trade, and that will be the new Mediterranean of the future. So we trust that we can go into this in a competitive way. We're a dollarized economy. Our profit margins are extremely good for investors. So we think that we can go into this new phase of opportunities in the post-COVID world in a very strong position of being able to do many things that bring opportunity to Ecuador.
Yeah, as you mentioned, as Adrian mentioned at the beginning as well, President Moreno was, of course, here in Washington earlier this year. You're here now. This is actually your first official trip to Washington as foreign minister, at least.
Yes, it's my first official visit as foreign minister anywhere.
Anywhere, okay.
Yes, because to tell you the truth, I had a visit last month. We had programmed a visit to Europe, and Europe began to close. The foreign ministers I was going to meet got COVID. The High Commissioner for Refugees got COVID. So they began to close down the appointments I had. And when we had agreed on this date with the United States, in a fashion of where tomorrow we meet in this dialogue and in the investment and trade council, and this is taking up a huge importance. At this moment in Washington, we have 5 ministers from the cabinet who are accompanying us in different sectors, and we had the finance minister come up, we had the health minister come up. So Yvonne has had a very busy schedule in her embassy, getting along with more than half a dozen ministers from the cabinet.
Yeah, it's impressive. As we look at the number of ministers who are here right now, the president's trip to Washington earlier this year, frankly, US-Ecuador relations are so strong right now.
Absolutely.
They're at the strongest point, at least in recent history. What's your plans on how to build on that between now and the conclusion of the president's term?
We have strategized on key points in what we call the map of strategic objectives, which have to deal with the problems we are going to deal with tomorrow, which, to repeat myself, migratory issues, security issues, narco trafficking, the trade issues, the cooperation. We're very thankful to the American people and to the American government for the cooperation we've gotten, both for COVID and others, which are beyond $100 million. Ecuador has received during this period approximately $300 million in cooperation, non-reimbursable cooperation, and we also have a segment of NGO cooperation, which is outstanding, which is $370 million over the next 3 years. So in spite of the effect that this has had on person's economies, on other countries, on other people, because much of that cooperation comes from people to people, church to church, family from family. And I think that is the merit of having this very strong relationship. It's not only a government issue. I learned this when I was ambassador here, that the strength of the relationship is more people to people and the understanding of how we deal with, how our values coincide, how our respect for individuals and human rights, how how the respect for democracy, freedom of expression become part of our ingrained relationships.
Yeah, that we were commenting that, but just before we went on camera, how great it is that we're actually able to be here, socially distanced, and having this in-person dialogue. Um, you talk a lot with your colleagues all across the hemisphere, and there's been a number of questions about how united is Latin America and the Caribbean right now. Which direction is the region headed? Is the region headed toward greater fragmentation, or is the region headed toward greater unity? So I'd like to get your broader perspective on the overall trajectory of the region, given the conversations you're frequently having with your colleagues. As you mentioned beforehand, the importance of unity, especially facing the COVID-19 pandemic. Latin America, of course, having 8% of the world's population and 1/3 of COVID cases and deaths. So what's your assessment of the degree of unity in the region? And then also what more can be done to enhance that unity?
Well, I've been a firm believer in the unity of Latin America, but I also have to recognize that we have diverse cultures and diverse countries that have different stages in their history and their reactions. Many even different than our fundamental representative democracies. This has always been a case of how we dialogue amongst ourselves to reach common objectives. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes we get by. Sometimes it's much more easy because we have the commonality of problems. I think we have to unite around the COVID issue, independently of whatever ideology the governments have or the countries have in that sense. My vision of Latin America that's vital is a democratic Latin America that can dialogue with the differences that we understand and know of each other. I'm very optimistic that both in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, which I normally would visit before being foreign minister, get to a united front. It's not only Latin America as a component, it's the world.
Yeah.
I think multilateralism has to be restructured in a way that it becomes a positive mechanism of solution to the problems. Our people are trusting that we can actually become a part of the world scenario of consensus. If we can get to the point in which we can actively benefit our peoples by reaching those consensuses instead of these spikes between one region and the other, I think we lose a lot of energy and we lose a lot of capabilities. We have to be able to sit down and iron out our differences. And when you talk about the role Latin America plays in the world, Latin America is one of the most vital democratic institutions in the world scenario. I've been ambassador to New York 3 times. I've been ambassador to Geneva 3 times. And I think the component of Latin American stability in those different regions of the world brings a plus to the discussion. An integrated, well thought out, professional council as diplomacies are.
Yeah.
I am very proud of the professional diplomacy Ecuador has, and that it can be able to guide processes in the world of commonality and good purposes.
Well, thank you, Mr. I want to turn to Ambassador Paula Delriansky, who's a board member of the Atlantic Council, former Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs. She's also a senior fellow at the Balfour Center at Harvard University. For a question, Paula, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Minister, thank you so much for coming today to the Atlantic Council. I would like to ask you about Venezuela. Ecuador has received over 400,000 Venezuelans in the last few years. What additional support can the United States provide to Ecuador and its neighbors, especially given the likelihood of a further increase of Venezuelan migrants and refugees in the coming year? And anything else you'd like to say about the crisis itself in Venezuela? And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Paula, and my greetings. We're old friends. I know we know each other.
Indeed. Nice to see you.
Venezuela is a crisis point for the Americas. It's going to have an elections which I don't think are democratically in the patterns of what we have. It's not a democratic election and I've stated this officially before. I believe that the migratory issue of 5.5 million Venezuelans leaving Venezuela has created one of the most complicated humanitarian problems that we have at the moment in Latin America. Ecuador has 400,000 Venezuelans, of which 200,000 have been given work permits, visas to live in, and we are initiating next year a process of regulating the others. But as we do this, Ecuador has been a transit point of more than 1,800,000. When this began, we had young men and women doing the migratory pattern. Now we have families, and families stay. And families in an Ecuadorian society, which is dollarized, prefer to stay in Ecuador, earn dollars to send back to Venezuela, for where the needs of their families are much more are much needed. I think the problem of migration is very complex because of the COVID affection of our working forces. We have informal workers that are being affected by COVID that cannot go out and work, and that have to level out an equilibrium between work and death and COVID. Now, that brings into question how we integrate these Venezuelan groups into Ecuadorian economy. I just signed an agreement on Friday with Korea and a private group called Corpey in Ecuador, which is an institution of entrepreneurship, in order to guide a process of the beginning. It's a $500,000 process to integrate entrepreneurship into the migratory stream of the Venezuelans that are coming to Ecuador. We have to find creative solutions to this. This is not a problem that will go away. It will not go away not in the next few years. So for us, it's a very complicated management of a situation which we feel will continue. And the spike of COVID in Venezuela will bring more migrants into our region. So the level of what we're seeing happening there will probably create more problems for those countries that are receiving migrants. What can the United States do? It can collaborate with countries like mine in creating those forces to integrate these migrants into societies. Ecuador does not have camps for migrants, does not have camps for refugees. This is a people-to-people issue where these migrants are integrated into our societies, into our cities, and need to work next shoulder to shoulder with Ecuadorians. So if we can get the resources, if we can get the help from the multilaterals, the Organization of International Migration, the Refugee Organization, if we can get programs that stabilize these hundreds of thousands or millions of people, we will have reached the problem that is affecting all the countries of the region because of this migration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We have I'm looking here. We have a number of questions that come up. We probably should schedule this to be a 2-hour event rather than a 30-minute event, given the number of questions we have. I do want to turn to Landon Loomis to provide some closing thoughts here, who's the Vice President of Global Policy and Managing Director of Brazil at the Boeing company that is graciously supported today's event. Landon?
Great, thanks so much, Jason, to you and to Adrian for hosting this event. Mr. Minister, thank you for joining us. I first just wanted to reflect on the conversation we were having about the combination of trying to solve the COVID problem and the economic problem, and just reflect on the importance that air travel plays for the economy of Ecuador. It contributes 207,000 jobs, $3.2 billion to GDP, and that's tourism plus all the export industries that are so crucial and so unique to what Ecuador offers the US and the world: shrimp, flowers, and fresh fruits, and so on. But as you think about how to come out of this COVID period, how to get back to trendline growth, and you pick your partners, just know that Boeing, we have a good understanding of the country, we know the business, and we know what it takes to succeed in an environment like this. But just aside from that, I did want to reflect on June 27th and 28th, 2018, when I had the privilege and the honor to accompany Vice President Pence for his historic visit to Quito. That was the first visit of its kind since 1958. And the issues that were focused on at that time, fighting transnational crime and narco trafficking, and focusing on bilateral trade and investment, elevating the political relationship with the relaunch of a bilateral political dialogue, and focusing on democracy across the region, and really using the moral voice, Ecuador's strong moral voice, to endorse those messages was so powerful. it felt like a relationship returning to its natural equilibrium, a positive equilibrium after a decade hiatus. And so as I reflect on what it means, what the relationship means through the transition period.
We might have lost Landon's video feed there. But thank you very much, Landon. Thinking about the relationship as we move forward. Mr. We I think he's still frozen on the screen there. Mr. We have we're out of time here. We have a number of questions that still to be remaining for all of you who put questions in the Q&A function. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all those questions. We'll just have to have you back another time to talk about some of those issues that were raised. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your leadership, and look forward to more discussions and to further strengthening the U.S.-Ecuador relationship.
Jason, thank you very much. I'm very sorry we couldn't answer the question. I'm a believer in tourism, and I hope that we get back to the normalcy of having those air transportation that are so vital to communication and to trade. I wish the world would be a better place in that sense. And I thank the opportunity of being here, and thank Adrian and yourself for this very nice gesture of inviting me to the Atlantic Council. And you will have me either personally or by feed anytime you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.